Hi, it's almost Valentine's Day, so we thought we'd show you our special technique for top stitching our Valentine surprise blocks. My technique is no sewing until you quilt it. So most of the time for all of my projects, after I have built my quilt on the French Fuse foundation, then I make my quilt sandwich. I have a back and a batting that I've put together with 505 spray base. That is the way I do most of my projects, and that's why it's called no sewing until you quilt it, because you've made your quilt sandwich and then you stitch and quilt all at the same time. But I have a love affair with my little featherweight sewing machine, so I'm going to show you a different way to do this. You might enjoy it also. You can top stitch these blocks now just with the French Fuse as the foundation. We're going to top stitch the block, and then I'm going to put all my blocks together with sashing, and I plan to send this project to a long arm machine quilter to finish the quilt. All right, now we're going to have our block, and before I stitch it and quilt, or just stitch it today, any loose pieces, I'll just go ahead and stick a little more glue stick in there. And then I always take my blocks to the ironing board, and I'm going to make sure that everything is fused down to the French Fuse. Just going to give it one final good pressing. Let the heat do the work. All right, so I'm using a piece of plastic. I put it over my design. And I'm going to start with a little tack right here. I'm just going to bring my thread up and stitch this way for my first stitching and end that. Then I'll come back to the center again, just do a little tack stitch, and I'm going to come down this way and back and around this little corner and stop. And then I'm going to come here like this. And I'm going to go around the blocks like that. I'll have to back stitch a few places to get these. But anyway, you can just play around with a piece of plastic, figuring out which direction. And then at the very final thing, I will, you'll see, I'll be able to stitch all around this heart-shaped flower. I love my little featherweight sewing machine. It's so portable. It is not really very light, though. I wonder sometimes why they call it a featherweight, but it is small and portable, and it has such a nice sound to it. I have invisible thread on top, and I'm just using a cotton thread in my bobbin. Sometimes when I do this, I like using the Bottom Line by Superior because it's a nice thin thread, but always test this first with you know, a little piece of fabric to make sure the stitches look okay. So I have invisible thread on the top, and the thing about a featherweight, you have to thread it correctly. All of my machines thread a different way, so I have to remember that you thread these from the inside out. And I needed my assistant Rachel to see it. The only problem I have with this is it doesn't have an automatic needle threader, so I need a good pair of glasses or young eyes to help me thread this. The invisible thread that I'm using works nicely with this machine. This is a sulky polyester. It comes in these small spools, and that works really nicely with this little machine. Usually when I'm working, I have my thread, a big cone of my thread on a thread stand. But we're working with the featherweight today, so I just wanted to show you this. And I have my clear plastic 1/4 inch foot. And it has this nice little you can follow that right along the edge of the pattern pieces, and that works out nice. Now when I come down here, this line doesn't match up perfectly, so because there's no sewing in it, I can just pick that up and make it match. So I'm going to use my sewer stiletto to bring that down so that lines up a little nicer. And so I'm just guiding that foot, that plastic inside of that foot, right along that seam line, and then I'll leave the needle down to pivot it. And I can pick this up too. If this doesn't match as like I would like it to, you see how the French fuse is underneath. There's nothing else here besides our fabric, the quilt top on the French fuse foundation. So you put the needle down and adjust that. Alright, this was our first line. We just came down here like this, and we're going to stop here. And I'm going to pull this out of the machine quite a ways because I don't want to have to rethread this any more times than I have to. So I'm going to clip that off, and you can see what the back looks like. We're top stitching, so we stitch the things that are on top. We came down here like this with that little plastic foot falling right along the edge of the pattern. We're working with invisible thread on the top. If you wanted to, you could use something else, but I'm planning to take this to a long arm machine quilter. So by stitching this on top with invisible thread, then she can use whatever color she decides to stitch this quilt. But invisible thread is hard to see, so I'm just going to mark my first line. I'm just going to put that there so I know that's the first one I did, just as a marker. And now I'm going to continue around in another direction here. Remember, we're only stitching the things that are on top. That's why we're top stitching this. So I leave my needle down and turn it. I'm going to have to back stitch this just a bit. I want to get right on the edge of those pattern pieces. And go in the forward motion again. Have to remember, this isn't just pushing a button to back it up. You have to pull a lever up and down. So I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to actually go up to here because we haven't stitched that. The featherweight does have a free motion foot, which would be nice because then you could go in any direction. But these blocks are small enough to pivot. So I'm going to just go back over that again. Now we've finished all of the straight pieces. Now I want to show you how nicely this works with the curved pieces. We're just going to go outline this whole curved section pieces. So I'm holding my invisible thread and bringing the bobbin thread up. And let's pull that up. Sometimes I have to get my scissors under there to bring it up. There we go. So I'm holding on to the bobbin thread too. And this plastic ruler, I'm just going to put that, or plastic foot, I'm putting right down on the edge of my pattern piece, and I'm going to stitch right along the curve. So see how nicely this it's a nice outside curve, and it's stitching, just following along there quite nicely. I put my reading glasses on so I can see better. Cutting that thread. And I just love, you know, stitching around those, just curving it just like that. Bring it up here. Then I'm going to pivot it. And let's see, I got to go there another stitch or two to get that up there. There. That little plastic foot just kind of follows right along that edge of our pattern shapes. So we stitched around our pattern pieces just through the French Fuse foundation, and you can see the stitching lines that we stitched through here. I used a cotton thread. I could have used something a little more colorful to show up. Okay, we finished stitching around our block. We decided to do all the straight pieces first, and then you saw us gently going around all of these curves. Now, if we were truly doing no sewing until you quilted, we would have the batting and the backing here, and our block would be essentially almost done except for a little decorative quilting. But on these blocks, we're using invisible thread on top because we're going to be taking it to a long arm machine quilter now after we have all of the blocks top stitch and the sashing on. And it was fun to use my featherweight machine. Because I have low vision, I enlarged my little book, the book that comes with your machine, little featherweight machine, the instruction book. I just increased the size of that, and I wanted to tell you that when we were working on this today, I did get a little invisible thread caught in the bobbin, and so I followed the directions in my book for taking this off, and then by just moving the wheel, I could pull the thread up. So anyway, the instruction booklet is good to have with you. And you could use stitch this with, you know, a colorful thread so you could see it. But for invisible thread, the first thread that we were using was on this little spool, and it was so curly. I also have some YLI invisible thread, and I like that better when I change the thread because it's not quite as curly, and so that did a much nicer job for us. Also, if you can find invisible thread that's 0.006 or even 0.005, that's better than these that are 0.004. Anyway, your machines, any machine you use would like that little bit a more thickness of the invisible thread. So anyway, we hope you will enjoy your Valentine surprise. And anyway, it was fun to show you my little featherweight machine today. Happy Valentine's. I wanted to tell you that I never even had to adjust my tension on my machine. So just practice with a little practice piece first. But by just going through the French Fuse in this top, my tension has not changed from regular sewing.